Dr. Elmer, Advanced Neurospinal Solutions, and this is Ask the Doctor. What is auditory processing? Man, I love you guys' questions. These are really wonderful. Auditory processing. Now, when we talk about the nervous system, remember I likened it unto a keyboard. The keyboard on the computer is like the sensory system, and we got light, sound, smells, taste. Plus, we've got all kinds of things that feel body tension, your sense of your body, and gravity against you, and that we're trying to learn our environments, understand our environment, and then respond to it. And then there's that part in the middle, right? We got the keyboard, and then we got the monitor, which is the motor output. But then we got the CPU, the brain part of the computer. It's the one that crunches those numbers, and that it's got all those adding machines in it. And so that's the computer system. That's your brain. That's your nervous system. And so in looking at what is auditory processing, we're taking auditory information in, and that auditory information is coming into our brain. It's coming into our brain stem, and then going into our temporal lobes. You don't hear with your ears. You hear with your temporal lobes. You perceive with your ears, and that information is turned into electrical impulses, and it goes into your brain stem, and then on into your temporal lobes. And your temporal lobes does the number crunching and takes it from an electrical impulse and turns it into an understanding of what that is. Now, there are areas in the brain that are hearing different aspects of hearing. Like if you're on the beach, you hear the seagulls, you hear the waves on the beach, but then you might hear somebody talking. Well, there are areas in the brain that are going to divide those out and say, whoa, that's important. I need this to go to a different area of the brain. And we've talked about speech, we've talked about understanding, we've talked about learning, and that's on the left side of the brain. So here's the temporal lobe right in here, and we hear, and that goes to an area, a secondary area. That's a primary auditory area. Then a secondary area is going to figure out what kind of sound is that. If we decide that sound is a word, if we recognize it, it goes to the word area, Wernicke's area. And that is going to go in there, and we're going to recognize, oh yeah, that's a word. I know it. I know that that's a word. I've heard it before. But we're not understanding what that word means yet. Then it goes into the lower parietal lobe, into Geschwin's area. And Geschwin's is where we now put a meaning or a value on it. And that area is where we understand what that means. Then it's going to go through the arcuate fasciculus to Broca's, which is where we give our response. Now we also have, it's really cool, a connection in the arcuate fasciculus that goes back. If you ever heard yourself talk to yourself, that's that connection. And that's one of the things I always ask, do you hear yourself talking? Or I'll give you a sentence and you'll repeat it back. And if you can't repeat it back, that bridge is out. so we're going to need to work to see if we can put that back together. So, but the Geschwin's there is where we start to understand what it means. And so we're taking information in from lots of different sources, but auditory processing is literally to process the auditory information. So it's that funnel. The information's coming in from an auditory point of view, and as it comes in, now you've got the actuaries, the CPAs, that are doing all the number crunching, and it's coming out with understanding values, and that ultimately at the end I call it values instead of definitions. And we're not only getting, like let's say it's words, each word has meaning, but also those meanings go together. They slam together. You make a bunch of words together, we call it a sentence. And that creates a flow of meanings, a flow of values, and that. And so what's interesting is reading, the word read means to riddle or unravel. And that's really the issue today in most reading programs is we're not learning to riddle or unravel. We are learning to pronounce, which is not a bad idea. We want to know how to pronounce, but we finally get the kid to know how to pronounce stuff, and as they learn to pronounce it, then we go, yeah, but he can't comprehend anything. Yeah, we didn't work on that, right? We worked on phonics and phonetics and phonemes and that. Yeah, great, but now we're going to have to convert those into meanings. Now there's the connection between the two. I call it a highway, and we want dirt bike paths to become 6-lane highways, and that's why I like exercises that actually work in both directions. Words to meaning and meanings to words, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and that. But what do we do here? We call it the layered effect, where we're turning on the blood flow to the area. Where as we turn on the blood flow, we're turning on areas around it. And then we're doing the therapies, and we're doing those therapies in a novel way, knowing the deficits of that individual in the nervous system. We're layering these therapies so they could be literally, as they're doing what they would normally do in a reading program with respect to phonetics or whatever, we would be doing four or five other kinds of activities at the same time. And so that area boosts way faster. So, but this auditory processing is the ability to take that information and crunch the numbers and give a meaning. Now let's put that back into the computer analogy. We got the sensory input. In this case, it's on the auditory part of the keyboard. That information comes in, and we're watching for the motor output, which is usually speech or writing, or we're watching facial expressions change, right? The light goes on, we can see that the light goes on, there's understanding and that, but we're putting that information in and we're watching the motor output. But what we're doing is we're changing the number crunching system, number crunching area within the computer, so that it will give a more appropriate output all the time without us having to really fight to make that happen. And as we start and that, it's very difficult, and then it gets easier, and then as we keep going, it becomes a behavior that happens with great ease, and that's the goal. You can see that when you know what the problem is, the solution just lays itself out in front of you. The simpler the solution, as we say in here. So if you have any questions, please ask. I love these kind of questions. These get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on and that. And it also usually brings hope to people, because they'll hear all these things that are wrong with them, and they'll say, oh no, there's nothing that can help. And usually that's not the case. So if you're ready to take your life back, we're here. Thank you. Bye.